There's a time and there's a place for medically supervised hormone intervention. And I'm here with the man himself, Derek, More Plates, More Dates, which, unless you've been living under a rock, you probably know who he is. And he's the man to kind of talk to about this. And Derek, I want to kind of turn it over to you just to give sort of a quick overview before we dive into things. Like, what is the difference between steroid abuse and medically supervised intervention?
Yeah, so the lines get blurry because sometimes people will be prescribed stuff that could otherwise actually enter into that territory. But if you have like a high quality doctor and a clinic that's doing things by the book, I would say, like in general, I would say actual therapeutic replacement is going to be represented in a exogenous testosterone that is dosed at an amount to achieve symptom relief. So typically if you were trying to achieve some sort of benefit in a actual clinically warranted capacity, it would be because you had some sort of symptoms like erectile dysfunction, you no longer get morning wood and you're wondering, when I was in my 20s, I used to have this all the time, what's going on? Or severe brain fog, mood swings, there's so many things that come from low test that might otherwise be represented in the manifestation on an actual blood test, and you would see, I have a deficiency in, it's not always just your total testosterone. Even if your total testosterone is on paper in range, you could still have low testosterone if you have a disproportionately low free testosterone, or sometimes it's just you need more than the next guy to actually feel good and function at a high level. So in general, what it looks like when you have actual therapeutic replacement is whatever dose equates to symptom relief that gets you back to that high vitality, high quality state of life that is representative of what you might otherwise have as when you were in your young 20s or something. And then getting into abusive territory is kind of where you see the question was, how do you differentiate it between it, or
right now everyone's sort of looking at this, right?
Yeah.
And it's I want to make sure that we kind of unblur some of these lines as sort of a difference between someone that's just going out and blasting themselves with a bunch of gear compared to someone that is really having the nuance and having medical supervision to do it right to restore sort of vitality. Mm-hmm. I guess I just kind of answered it right there, but just to kind of open up with sort of that explanation of what's the difference between, because they're not the same. They're very, very different.
No, yeah, synthetic hormones that are derived from testosterone, like actual anabolic androgenic steroids, like Winstrol, D-bol, Trenbolone. Some of these are, different categories of steroids with more nuance, but ultimately, these are not things your body naturally produces or relies on to do things. The only thing your body from the anabolic steroid side of things really uses and relies on is testosterone, and then downstream to that, DHT is another androgen, but your body relies and functions on that to facilitate any androgen-driven processes in the body, and it kind of has this, balancing seesaw effect with estrogen to some extent. But all these synthetic hormones are not things you produce. They're not necessarily therapeutic in that you don't produce them or rely on them endogenously. So getting into the testosterone side of things is just from that, owning in on that specifically, because that's the one hormone that we produce and rely on to actually fulfill all of these things. What is actually therapeutic? That is going to be dictated, like I said earlier, about what is going to relieve symptoms in general. There is this push towards what is on paper, and I think more recently, more kind of informed and reasonable assessments by providers are leaning towards this more the piece of paper that shows a number. It's just a piece of paper that shows a number. It can become somewhat arbitrary because you might have a 600 total testosterone on a piece of paper but still have symptoms, and at that point it becomes very much a nuanced medical oversight derived problem where it's you need the provider who actually knows how to assess what dose you need relative to your own individual needs. So what is therapeutic versus not? Again, individual specific, but it kind of derives down to, at the end of the day, not just is your number in the reference range, right in the middle, but very much, do you have a high quality state of life and is representative of something that and again, when I say high quality state of life, don't conflate that with, like, you could have other things in your life that are conflating your perception of what you think might be low test. Like if you have a stressful job or whatever, it doesn't mean your TRT dose is too low because you might otherwise be stressed. Like it doesn't make you a superhuman just because your test is, in range now. We're on the high end of normal. So again, it does become nuanced, but as long as you are achieving basic androgen-driven functions, and I think this is often relatively more easily identified through things like erectile quality, libido, things that are very, very testosterone driven, that's typically a good metric by which, doctors will evaluate, okay, the number is corrected, but what about, the things that you rely on for testosterone, are those dialed in? Do you feel good? Do you have, if you had mood swings before, are those kind of dialed in now? How's your sleep quality? Is it still terrible? A lot of those things will correct themselves if you have a dialed-in protocol that is representative of therapeutic replacement. And once you get into abuse territory, you start to see the manifestation of that on blood work too, and oftentimes in symptoms in the opposite direction, where you start to feel, perpetually kind of like redline. You feel a bit more, like tuned up all the time. It becomes harder to get to sleep. You might have an elevated, red blood cell count from having higher levels of erythropoiesis that otherwise wouldn't have been there if you were just keeping your levels where they should be, sort of thing. So it becomes a bit more, it very much reflects itself in the symptoms and also on your blood work, and this is where a high quality doctor can kind of identify, like, this is your therapeutic zone.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's I guess it opens up into the more casual conversation and just dialogue of, like, this is where things, in my opinion, get confusing for the general population that doesn't have a full understanding of this, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's easy to say that if someone is going to a responsible doctor as a responsible person and getting testosterone replacement because they need it from a lifestyle perspective to live the highest quality of life, that is not necessarily a problem. That is not when we're talking about steroid abuse and we're talking about the usage of even performance enhancing drugs, like that category, I would like to think is widely accepted, but unfortunately the lines get blurred and it gets talked about in the same vein as going on the black market, getting a bunch of garbage and putting it in your body and trying to get as jacked as you possibly can, right? Yeah. And my concerns are like, okay, well, when those lines get blurred, you have people that are doing perfectly healthy things, people in their 40s or 50s or 60s that just want their life back, because I don't know if you know any of the data. I don't know it right offhand, but I do know that we're generally on a pretty steady decline of testosterone levels in men. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, so it's, when we look at that, it's like something has to give. There has to be sort of a balance there. And with this kind of, where we have to be careful is there, because of so many people doing TRT, does it swing the other way too? Is there like a normalization where younger generations are saying, well, my dad's on TRT, so I can go ahead and hop on gear. Totally just your opinion, but what's kind of your take on that? Are you seeing that, or is that just in my head? Or now, I put a link down below for ButcherBox if you want really good quality, just honestly the best tasting grass-fed, grass-finished beef. I put that link down below. ButcherBox delivers it to your doorstep. I've been using them for 5-6 years. They've been on this channel for 5 or 6 years. It's nothing new. But if you're trying to add maybe some good quality meat into your breakfast, it's a really good option. So their fillets are probably some of the juiciest that I've ever had. Okay, they're like, usually if I get a fillet, the downside is it's tender, but you don't get the fattiness that really makes it taste good. For some reason, it's something about the ButcherBox fillets are just really, really savory and they melt in your mouth. It's really, really cool. But if you do want to go the route of having a fattier cut, they have some delicious ribeyes, some New York strips that are really great too. So that link is down below for you to check out ButcherBox. That's a special access link. You can also see the kind of cuts that I choose in my own personal box if you kind of want to mimic what I do. So that link down below in the description.
No, I think there's definitely, it's become somewhat trendy. There is normalization of hormone use. Like, for example, if it wasn't something that was literally the hormone you rely on to build muscle, would people still, or the thing that, drives erectile quality and, libido and all of these things, would it be glamorized the way it is? Probably not. If it was just like a thyroid hormone or something that otherwise you just need to function properly, like there are a lot of people that are hypothyroid or have autoimmune issues that might otherwise, you're not going to glamorize and just like hop on thyroid because you thought you needed it, sort of thing. Like maybe some people might for like they think they're going to get fat loss out of it or whatever, but like in general, from the endocrine hormone side of things, like there's nothing that's been glamorized the way testosterone has. And I do think there's a normalization of its use as if it's like, oh, you're a certain age equals get on it, when oftentimes it may not be warranted. Now, again, it gets into an interesting kind of side topic where, you know, who is anyone to say that somebody shouldn't be able to just kind of do something outside of the, you know, clinical guidelines necessarily, if they just wanted to be, you know, performance enhanced or whatever. Like it gets very, very nuanced because like who are we to judge if somebody wants to manipulate their hormones manually? So it's kind of just like at the end of the day, you thoroughly educating yourself about whatever pros and cons could be there, and then also being very, very cognizant of as you push things and you push the envelope, where does the body start to fight back, and is that ROI worth it for you?
Yeah, that's really well said. And I think, you know, my personal stance is that, you know, if you're symptomatic, as we talked about before, if you're going to get lifestyle improvement out of it, like, I don't see any problem in going to a good quality doctor and improving your quality of life. And I think that's where sometimes people look at the side of health and fitness and just kind of living this holistic lifestyle, and they're like, okay, well, I want to like look at this holistically, and how do I have a well-rounded, just better approach at my life to vitality and lifespan, or health span, I should say. And when they almost get scared about medical intervention because they feel like their idea of medical intervention is like, I have a serious problem and like this needs to get fixed with medication, or like I don't want to put something synthetic in my body. And what I want people to understand is that like, even as someone that like really encourages people to eat as close to the earth as possible, live like as just naturally and close to the earth as you possibly can, like if going to a hormone doctor ends up giving you the catalyst, that little catalyst that you need to sort of have this ripple effect throughout the rest of your body, where you can train better, where you can eat better, you have the motivation to make better dietary choices, you have the motivation to train, you have the motivation to have good relationships, which we're seeing are a huge part, you know, in the epidemiological data with even the blue zones and whatnot. Like that's important for lifespan. Like you have to, you know, don't put the cart before the horse, or should I say, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Like it's like, I don't think that we should be demonizing people that, and I'm not talking about the specific light, you know, events specifically. I'm talking about just like regular Bob, right? That's just like, I just want to have sex with my wife, you know, like. I don't think there's any problem with that, and I don't want like the series of events that are happening now to like scare perfectly good humans from going and getting the help that they need.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's sometimes there are polar extremes of, you know, you should only live naturally, and anything you do that is, you know, the antithesis of that is bad.
But we don't live in a natural world anymore. Like nothing about what we do is, you know what I mean? Like it's like there's going to be this. I don't mean to interject, but it's almost like I'm agreeing with you. It's like we don't like. We don't have, how can you live naturally when we don't even have seasons anymore? We have climate control. We have blue light everywhere. We have like nothing, everything is manipulated at this point. There's no way around it. So like to not be able to be okay with a little bit of intervention or to completely abstain from it, just to be natural, doesn't make sense because nothing about our life today is natural.
Yeah, I think some people might be like so passionate and like proud of the fact that they don't rely on anything. They might otherwise end up in a like suboptimal health state because of it. But at the same time, there are lots of people that get into like pretty damn old ages with like peaked hormone levels still, and they were just fine. So it's very, very individual specific. And I think it's just having an objective analysis of your own specific situation, what is warranted for you to be as healthy and high performing as you can be, but within reason of being mindful of the actual, you know, longevity implications potentially if you were going to push it outside of what is actually therapeutic, for sure. Well,
it's not like if you push it 5 degrees over that therapeutic dose, because who knows like what that's going to be, right? You probably can't narrow it down to a 1%. It's not like you're just going to keel over. You know, it's wild. This is just top of mind because you mentioned this. Like, I released a video a couple of days ago. I was talking about like why did the Japanese live longer than people in the United States? Obviously, a number of different factors, hard to pinpoint one thing. But one of the things that stood out to me so much is that their levels of DHEA later on in life are significantly higher than United States. And I started looking at that and I'm thinking, like, dove into it a little bit deeper. It's just very interesting. Like their hormone preservation is better. Now, back that data out however you want with whatever they do with their diet, lifestyle, whatever, that's irrelevant. The point is, like, just on paper with data, like they have this preservation of hormones in Okinawa that we don't have in the United States.
What other hormones did they show, or was it just the DHEA?
Yeah, it's mainly the DHEA, and then kind of there's the different DHEA metabolites. So it's like, I'll send you the study. It's just, it's wild, right? It's like, it's just, so who knows? And you take a look at like their health span versus not lifespan, but health span. Like their healthy life was up to about, I think it was 78 years old, where healthy life for the Americans stopped at like 66. And healthy life and vitality, there is a very strong correlation between, hormone optimization and that. So then it's like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Like if their hormones are optimized, are they more active?
Yeah.
Are they, again, having better relationships? Are they more intimate? I mean, all these things that do matter for esteem, for confidence, for using the brain and stimulus there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all rhetorical, but it's,
Yeah, no, I think ultimately just as much education around the topic to take away this stigma is worthwhile, because it does get this bad rap, or sometimes not bad enough of a rap if people think it's totally harmless, and you should be like just basically thoroughly aware of what you're subjecting yourself to if you do go down that route, or ideally have figured out like why you need it for sure, because some people just get on it because they think they need it because one person told them, hey bro, you're 37, you probably need test by
it's
now.
time.
Yeah. You've passed the arbitrary threshold of age whereby you need to inject yourself. Like no, shouldn't be the case.
When we talked 2 years ago on my channel, we were looking at my blood work, and like my testosterone was moderately low but not super low, and you asked me point blank, like, are you symptomatic? I'm like, no. And they're like, then why would you bother with it? Now, like, yeah, maybe like I am a little less motivated. I am, I feel that effect, right? So it's something that I viably consider now. It's like, but I still look at my numbers are about the same. Like the number's just a number, right? It's all about like how you feel. But I also have other factors in my life. I'm a little more stressed now. I've got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and they're effing crazy, right? So it's but like to counter back to the normalization piece I wanted to talk about. Like,
and it's interesting on that, sorry to interrupt, but like if you have 2 children, you're becoming more underslept because you're dealing with just basic parenting things that, deprive you from maybe a few hours per night or whatever it is. Like, I don't actually know what you have to deal with, but I imagine there are things in your life that, again, are you just supposed to accept, like, I could have a better number maybe where I wouldn't have symptoms. Like, you're not going to get rid of your kids, like you're dealing with that situation you've imposed upon yourself. So are you like a bad person for needing testosterone to be, a
better parent?
Yeah, exactly. Like you could even look at it from that angle.
Yeah.
If you're, a very, very unmotivated, more sedentary, and you can't support your family as well. Like there's so much nuance in this discussion about it that, it's not as black and white as do you need it do you not need it based on a number versus an age versus an age. It's super, super nuanced.
When you have a finite amount of time with your children where you can leave an impression upon them in a positive way. And like I want to talk to dads for a second and say, like, if you have a choice of being like a lethargic, lazy dad that doesn't get on the ground and play with his kids, doesn't go out and throw the football around with his kids, doesn't want to do stuff because your tea is in the toilet, your lifestyle sucks. Like, are you going to feel better about yourself missing out on those years, but telling your kids 20 years from now, I never went on TRT, I never saw a doctor? Or are you going to think you're going to have a bigger impact by going to a doctor, doing what you might need to do to be able to say, you know what, Jimmy, let's go out and let's go throw the football around. Let's roughhouse, let's play. Let's and actually give those kids an experience, and leave a lifelong impression upon them that could literally be a bigger lever to change the world than you could probably do with your life. And say 20 years from now, when the right situation came up, I went to a doctor, and that's just where the stigma, I think, needs to stop, right?
Yeah.
Like it's okay, like this has been around, like if you need to go do that. But then on the contrary, this normalization with social media where it's just like there's an assumption now that just anybody that's in shape or anybody, is on it.
Yeah.
And that can sometimes take the wind out of young people's sails, right? Where they're like, I'm not going to bother because everyone's on everything,
Yeah.
It's and that kind of happens with the normalization, but I think there's just the way that we solve that is exactly like this: is conversations and discussion.
No, and especially from I guess in the YouTuber space, especially guys who are natural and otherwise have achieved great things naturally, it's an even bigger leap to kind of justify it because there definitely is some level of I'm one of the last naturals here, and trying to maintain that. I imagine for you, that's even something you might struggle with, and that's why I think it's so important that this kind of a message is put on your channel, that you're even open to you know, the discussion of if hormones are warranted, you know, why or when it makes sense to start looking down that avenue, not necessarily you need to or you don't need to, but just being open to the discussion, because you could otherwise take the hard stance of like, I'm, you know, one of the only guys who is natural and like, look at my physique still.
I just don't care. Like, I'm in it for, like, it's about living, like, what is healthy.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and it's like, I've mentioned it before on my channel, like, when the time comes, and the time will come, like, I'm going to document everything and share it with people so that they can learn from it too. It's just, I just don't want people to get discouraged. And you should always, like, do whatever you can naturally first, like maximize yourself as much as possible, you know.
Yeah.
And that's and there's other categories that people could look at, like if that's, you know, the things, there's, you know, there's peptide routes people could look at. There's all kinds of different things that, like, if people are looking at, like, well, I have different goals and I want to go see doctors for different things, like, the world is expanding into the medical continuum more, where, like, these things can be done in a controlled fashion.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not that it's a condoning of that, but it's just, if people really feel like they need to do it right, do it right. Like, or sorry, if people really feel like they need to do it, like, just go to a doctor and do it right.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
If you feel like there's a need and you're at the age where it's realistic for you, just go to a doctor, do it right. You don't need to be taking matters into your own hands and just doing whatever willy-nilly. So, Derek, my man.
Yeah.
As always,
Thanks for having me, dude.